coming into I-Tech's world then, and the challenge of barnacles then. Why are they such a bad challenge? And we talked about this a long times or many times before. So this is essentially, you could say, a recap for our new listeners then. But barnacles, they really have a big impact on drag resistance and the friction in the water then for the ship, which increases fuel consumption or results in speed loss. And barnacles, they do thrive in most marine environments. Of course, the warmer the water is, the more activity you have. And they essentially superglue themselves to the surface and are extremely difficult to remove. And essentially, when you try to remove them, you typically damage the ship's coating, and essentially so much that you have to go and send the ship for repainting essentially afterwards. Which means that then the most efficient strategy is to prevent them from settling on the ship's hulls, and that's where I-Tech comes in, right? And we talked about it in Q4 or the year-end presentation as well, right? But what if a third of the global fleet actually was using 36% more fuel than needed just for a day? What would that mean in cost and emissions? And what we presented then, I think already in February, was this slide, right? A new in-docking data study that we conducted in the end of last year, beginning of this year, where essentially we asked Safina, a coating partner to ship owners, to look at their data, and they essentially they give advice and suggest solutions for ship owners, what type of coating to put on the ship. They were looking into the data sort of on the conditions of over 760 ships. And what they could see there, when they came in for dry docking then, a third of those ships really had completely unacceptable levels of barnacle fouling, right? More than a third of the underwater area being covered in barnacles, which means then, 40% or more additional fuel if you want to sail at the same speed. And what we also found in the study then was that the ships that were coated with Select Hope had a significantly improved condition in terms of that. So almost no or very little barnacles in those cases. And today, actually, then we thought of showing you some data. What does this mean for a ship owner or ship operator, that your ship is fouling and that you have, for instance, barnacles growing on the ship's hull? So I want to show you some new data then. And first we need to talk a little bit about vessel performance then. And when we mean vessel performance, is essentially, you have a certain RPM on your engine, and you can measure then what is the speed I get through water. And you can look at that over time. And that essentially you get a plot like this. You can see a lot of dots sort of seemingly all over the place. And of course, there are a lot of things impacting the speed of a ship, right? The wind force, the wind direction, the waves, the wave direction, the currents, and so on, right? Hence, you will get this really scatter of data points if you try to measure then what sort of engine power results in what type of speed. And essentially what you can see, though, is you see here the graph, speed loss is sort of on the negative x-axis here. So the lower you get, the more speed loss you have versus sort of your set speed. What is this ship supposed to sail at? What speed with certain engine performance, right? And then you can see over time. And what you see then is essentially a linear reduction in the speed over time, right? And that when you go into dry docking and you apply a new anti-fouling coating, then sort of that performance is gained back again. The ship can sail faster through water, and you started sort of a new round then of degradation, right? And this is essentially why the ships really need a new coating then, and sort of have to go into docking approximately every 5 years. So this is sort of a typical data set then for a ship owner. And I was speaking to several of performance monitoring service providers. So essentially companies then that help ship owners to monitor the performance of their ships. So they install essentially sensors, and they have softwares and data models then to see how the performance of the ship and sort of the speed through water develops over time. And sort of what they told me, looking at their data, one specific service provider, he said, typically, we have a lot of tankers and bulker ships in our fleet, right? And what we see on average is for all of this data, approximately they lose 7% of the speed over the 5-year period. And of course, there is variation in this data set, right? So there you have some vessels that have premium anti-fouling coating that is really optimized for their specific route and the activity level, that has close to no speed loss, right, during the 5-year period. And there are plenty of examples of sort of catastrophic examples. He mentioned one specific here. He could see a data set of a tanker that was idling outside the coast of Mozambique for 3 weeks, and essentially after that, the speed was heavily impacted, and they sent down divers to look, and they could see that both the sides and the flat bottom of the ship had 30% or more cover of barnacles and slime and algae, etc. Right, so essentially that ship would have to be sent to cleaning, and most likely at the cleaning event they would damage the hull coating so much that they probably would have to clean it again very shortly afterwards, or actually consider an early dry docking for that ship because it simply wouldn't perform. So, this data set is, of course, covered with different examples of ships and how they perform. And then you can say, okay, so what does this mean for a ship owner in terms of trying to translate the speed loss then into money? So we prepared a little case here, just as a case of example. So the rule of thumb, they say, is, whatever speed loss you have, you can multiply that 3 times to sort of get an estimate of the additional fuel that you need to recover that speed. So essentially a ship that has a speed loss of 7%, if I want to sail at the same speed, I have to increase the engine power and the fuel consumption 3 times 7, so 21% actually the fuel consumption. And of course that would have a massive impact over 5 years. And the nice thing here is, of course, if it's a linear effect that happens over time, you can see then, okay, what is the impact, right? So let's say that the ship captain, he was just compensating all the time this speed loss, right, with increasing the engine power and increasing the fuel use. In the end, over this 5-year period of time here, they would have overconsumed bunker fuel for a value of $1.8 million, right? So quite significant, right? The other option that he has is, of course, that, okay, we'll just sail slower because it's no problem. There is congestion in the port anyway. We will have to wait when we get to Rotterdam, etc. So we just steam along, slower. But that, of course, also has an economic impact. And that economic impact depends if you are sort of a ship owner, that you're operating the ships and you are doing sort of the trade service yourself, or if you are a ship owner that just charters your boat to others, right? And typically when you charter your boat, you have a fixed daily fee, and I assume the quite low rate here of $15,000, which is you could say quite a low rate considering today's situation or conditions in the market, right? But anyway, then over this 5 years period, you would have lost 45 days of productive time, right? And that would have an equivalent value then of $670,000. So also substantial money, right, to be saved by having a better anti-fouling solution. But then you come to, okay, what is the trade-off then? What is the cost of a premium anti-fouling versus sort of a basic paint scheme on the ships? And that could be an example we heard is up to $200,000, right? That's the difference that can be. So, of course, depending on the conditions of the market, are there good rates or are there bad rates, etc. What is the likelihood that the ship owner would put on a high-performing coating, right? It is always a balance, and you could say, is there enough money around to spend on service, or do I have to save on that as well? So things that actually impact the ship owner's decision of taking a premium coating or not. And just to reiterate to what we've said in the past as well, right? We do see an increased number of ship owners choosing premium anti-fouling coating. That has really grown its share in recent years. And we expect that to continue as well, because essentially the saving is really positive to do that. And that leads me to the market outlook then. So we in I-Tech, our solution then is used both for new builds and for dry dockings, right? And we estimate then with sort of the 10% increase, there will be around 2,000 new vessels being put on the market this year. And the dry dockings, they simply follow, you could say, a regular scheme. They have to come in at least every 60 months. However, of course, there is some wiggle room here. And typically what you see with the ship owners now is that, you know, times are uncertain, the charter rates are dropping, etc. Then the ship owners are trying to postpone the dry docking as long as possible, right? To maximize the value that they can get, because they know that the charter rates will go down, right? So let's wait and see, right? And not go in for a service event right now. Yeah, I mean, reflecting, you could say, our sales, both for new ships or vessels and for dry dockings, then China is dominating. But for new ships, then Japan and Korea are quite sizable markets as well. And that's something we talked about in the past. And the opportunity then for Selektope and for good anti-fouling technologies, we estimate to be around $300 to $500 million overall. So that is sort of the market that we're tapping into. So yes, for the newcomers, our solution is Selektope then, which is a substance called medetomidine that comes out of pharma. It's used as a sedative in veterinary and human medicine today. And it has the opposite effect on barnacles. It actually makes them temporarily hyperactive so that they cannot settle on the ship's hull. But it doesn't kill or harm the barnacles. It's a temporary and non-lethal effect. It enables coating companies to make more innovative, you could say better performing coating that has a lower also environmental footprint. And it is commercially proven now used in 6 out of the 9 largest paint companies. We hope to see number 7 coming during this year. And it is applied then to what we estimate a little bit more than 3,000 ships so far. So we believe we have a very, very scalable business with plenty of additional potential then. I mean, 3,000 ships out of a global fleet of 110,000 ships, there is definitely room to grow. Our model is outside asset light. We have outsourced the production, and we are looking into continuously optimizing, you could say, our supply chain and production setup. So that is also what we are reaping the benefits of now in the gross margin. We are essentially a knowledge company, so we're based on intellectual property, formulation, know-how, and sort of knowing the customers. And we have a really unique technology with Selektope. There is no direct competition today, but of course, other anti-fouling solutions are available in